Welcome, everybody. I'm Charles Bass. I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Relations at USD, and we're so glad to welcome you to this panel discussion, which is co-hosted by the Alumni Association and by Student Affairs and the Graduate Student Council. So thanks, everybody, for being a part of this. Our audience consists of mostly graduate students, some faculty or some staff, as well as friends and alumni. So we're glad to have everybody here listening to our panel of distinguished alumni from the University of San Diego, part of our growing and strengthening alumni network. So thanks to you all for being here. Before we get started on the panel discussion, I'd like to recognize Marian Sanchez, who is from the class of 2004 and 2008, and is the Assistant Director for Graduate Student Life, who wants to say a few things.
Yeah, you just put an age on my existence, Charles. Thank you for that. Thank you all for being on a part of this call. I just wanted to say this is very meaningful for our graduate students, as we've had a chance to do a lot of programming with them in these difficult times. Definitely career uncertainty has come up as one of their main areas of concern. And so a lot of our programs have shifted to really supporting students, as well as provide wellness programs, and mental health is definitely on the forefront of our students. So that being said, this is our Graduate and Law Student Wellness Week. So for the students that are connected today, I do have a little plug. We will have a series of events taking place, and so we were very excited to add this as a program during this week. But we also have a webinar today at 5 called Creating an Integrated Way of Thinking and Being in Uncertain Times. We have a mental well-being and graduate student experience webinar tomorrow, training with our wellness department. And we have a financial wellness and success strategies during COVID-19 session tomorrow as well. And we have a week-long's worth of exercise classes brought to us by Campus Recreation. So I just want to let the students know that this is one of the many events we'll be doing for this week. And with that, I turn it back to Charles. Thank you.
All right, I also want to recognize my colleague from the Alumni Office, another double Torero, Maya Hood, from the class of 2017 and 2018, who joined us 2 days before we went to work remotely. So we're glad to have Maya back on campus with us, even though she's not on campus. And also I'd like to thank Andrea Garcia, soon to be alumna and chair of the Graduate Student Council, and we'll hear from her a little bit later. So thanks to you, Andrea. And now let's introduce our panel. We'll do this alphabetically. So, and thanks to them for their time today. I've asked each of them to give a 30-second background on themselves. So we'll start first with Brian Daugherty, who got his master's in nonprofit leadership and management from USD in 2008. Brian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Daugherty. As Charles mentioned, I graduated from USD. I also worked at USD prior to my position now. So right now I am Senior Vice President and Chief Philanthropy Officer with San Diego Humane Society. We as an organization have 600 employees. I offered up that, not related to employees, but anybody who wants a kitten who's on this call, I'm offering up kittens. So that's my perk to jump in and top the other panelists today, that I'm offering kittens as a part of this deal. I've been essentially a fundraiser for the past 25 years. And can you all hear me, because you're all frozen?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because this is the joy of Zoom calls, is when everybody freezes and you're talking and you have no idea if anybody can hear you. So I've been doing fundraising for about 25 years now. That's what my life's work has largely been, and I'm happy to be a part of this panel and to share any nuggets of wisdom that I've accumulated over that time.
Thank you, Brian. And next up is Renee Fitzgerald from the class of 2006, also in nonprofit leadership and management.
Hi, I'm Renee Fitzgerald, and like Brian, I have been in the nonprofit sector my entire career, and I currently am in my 16th year of owning and running a nonprofit consulting firm. We work with nonprofits who are doing mostly capital campaigns, major giving, board development, those kind of things. I would say my master's from USD really prepared me for where I am now.
Perfect. Let's have a stop.
And I have no kittens.
No kittens. We'll stop for a commercial break. Remember the alumni website, alumni.sandiego.edu. I'm going to say that a few times. Next up, though, please welcome from the class of 2000 with her MBA, Emilie Hersh.
Good afternoon, and thanks for doing this, Charles. This is a lot of fun. USD, I actually worked there for 8 years, got my MBA there, great way to pay for school, and forever thankful for my experience there, both professionally and in the classroom. That network is incredibly important to me. I've been in technology for years now, consulting software development, built companies, own my own companies, all kinds of great things, and things always pull me back to USD, and I found some of my best employees there as well. So appreciate being here, happy to share whatever I can do. And any questions you have either now or afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for doing this, Charles.
Thanks, Emilie. And last but not least, please welcome Rebekah Smith from the class of 1993, Masters in Education on Counseling.
Hello, everyone. Presently, I am the Executive Director of Career Services at Point Loma Nazarene University. And like some of my fellow panelists, also spent time working at University of San Diego right after graduate school. I had a chance to work in career services there. So coming full circle with stops in between, working as a career coach at Qualcomm, and then also working in the private sector in agency recruiting with Eastridge Workforce Solutions, and then also High Tech High. So really happy to see everyone on here, and I know we're going to kick off with lots of other questions. Just wanted to say really quickly, we'll talk lots about networking, and looking at some of the folks already on the screen. I'm seeing Alex Lowe, who did an informational interview with me back in the day, probably in 2010, and now look where he works. And Tina Tan, who is now at San Diego State University, but when she was one of our graduate students, I had a chance to hire her at High Tech High. So yes, we'll talk more about networking, but that already sets the tone for what we're gonna talk about.
All right, well, that's we'll just use that segue to talk to get into the first questions, but we will have an opportunity at the end for questions, and I encourage you to use the chat feature. But let's just jump right in. As Marianne said already, and we all know that uncertain may be a pretty good way to describe this job market and just describe everything in our lives right now. So as Rebekah just said, networking is always important, but it's probably now more important than ever. So let's start with, I'll just jump right to you, Rebekah. What advice would you have on how to network in these times of COVID-19?
Right. I think the first thing I would say is to really be intentional. And again, I know our panelists are gonna add to this as well, but really to be intentional about the networking, making sure that you are deciding who it is you really want to reach out to, and having a why behind that. And then being very careful to not only reach out, but to follow up, and to be really clear about what it is that you are hoping to do, which is to add value in a conversation around asking questions, learning, discovering. A lot of times people will say, I don't want to network because I don't have anything to offer. Right now, people want to help. And especially, I can say this about our Torero network, we as alumni want to help. I think the first thing I just say is to jump off and just say, just to get started and do it and be intentional.
Great. And Brian, I'll let you follow up on that.
Sure, I think that's a great start. I mean, I think one of the things, this being a sort of a grad panel is a little bit different than doing an undergrad panel. Some of you, many of you may have jobs that you have now. You maybe were looking at your grad degree to serve as a springboard to maybe allow you to get a different position. And now is obviously a difficult time for that. One of the things that I would say is, you know, I would imagine there are some folks on this call that are saying to themselves, I've been doing networking for a while now. Others maybe not so much. Start now. If you're looking for a job or you're thinking about getting a job, to me, that is your job at this point, and you need to bring a discipline to that process of really being able to reach out in creative ways and using LinkedIn right now. Everyone should be all over LinkedIn and asking people for 15-minute conversational Zoom calls. And I think we'll then talk about how you need to be professional in the image that you present on those calls, understanding that every single interaction that you have with someone that you're networking with is essentially part of a job interview process, because they're going to remember your professionalism. They're going to remember whether you followed up. To Rebekah's point, if you say you're going to do something, make sure that you do it. Make sure that you can schedule those things in there. In my time in doing this, folks that follow up stand out far and above for the people that don't. Give yourself something to follow up for. Try and find a shared interest, something that you can say, you know what, I have an article on that. I'll follow up and send that to you. Because what you're really looking to do out of this networking is to create a relationship and a connection with the folks that you're working with. So don't miss those opportunities. If you get someone who's going to agree to spend 15 minutes on Zoom with you, be prepared for that. Know the company that they work for. Have very real, relevant questions about what their culture is like at that organization, what they like about it, what maybe they don't, what recommendations would they have for you as a potential employee to be able to come in there. So you need to bring a plan of action to all of those steps. The conversations that you're having as part of networking aren't haphazard. They're not mistakes. They're strategic conversations that you need to be prepared to drive. So I just want to offer that to say, I think a lot of people go into this very, very casually, and it's really not a casual process. It is part of the job process. It is part of your brand. It is part of your image. And the folks that you interact with in email, on WebEx, on Zoom calls, whatever it might be, it's all a part of the equation of where you're going and how you want to get there. So I would sort of add to Rebekah's comments with that as well.
Thank you. And Emily, I know that we're jumping around a little bit, but you talked about LinkedIn earlier on one of our calls. So suggestion for best practices using LinkedIn?
Yeah, a couple of things actually. I left my position at Rackspace after 18 months at the end of this past January. And I'm actually doing a lot of what you're doing now. Fortunately, I had a company that was still going to go back to, but I didn't have time during those 18 months due to travel and everything else to really connect with people. So part of my reconnecting with folks has been selfishly somewhat just fun, right? To see what's happening in their world as well. There are definitely some LinkedIn best practices. I actually sat down with a consultant out of Melbourne a few weeks ago and had her go through my profile. And I actually have 3 pages of notes that I still have to get going to update my profile, but all good advice and little things. And Charles, I'll send you a note if you want to share it with everybody on the call later. But there are a couple of areas on LinkedIn, for example, in your profile header and a few others where if you do it on your phone, you actually get more character space, right? So instead of doing it on your laptop, add more information on your phone and you can be a little more creative. And again, I'll send those bullet points through. I think also when you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, I get hit every day. I'm sure all of you do. Random stuff. People I've never heard of, people I've never met. There was a great one yesterday. Some guy says, hey, do me a favor and add me, THX. I'm like, I have no idea who you are. It's not professional and it's not what we're looking for. Be meaningful, right? Understand how either on your phone because it's different or on LinkedIn, especially on your laptop, how you actually send that invite with a note. Always send a note. Hey, I met you on this call. Hey, I was reading about you and I'd love to do an informational interview. To Brian's point, if you have 15 minutes, here's my contact info. Don't make them search for it. People are open to that. As Rebekah said, we're here to help. We've been in your situation. This is not the first time this has happened economically and it won't be the last. So hopefully these are good tools all the way through, but reach out to any of us. I think on LinkedIn as well, if you actually know the person, see if you can hit them up to do a mock interview. We've been doing a lot of that through the mentor program I've been working with at Cal State, and interviews are on Zoom now. So it's great to be able to practice that, see if people are fidgeting, see if they stand up and they're only dressed appropriately from the waist up, right? Look at their background, right? I will tell you, turn on my Zoom every time before I get on a call because our office is a disaster because we've been rebuilding it. I just want to make sure that no one can see what's on either side of these panels, right? Because that's not good either. But there's so many great things that we can all do through Zoom, and Zoom's a great tool. Get on, be on video, make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated, matches your resume as well. So there's no, oh, right, I didn't mean to put that there. And just be clean. I think clean cut LinkedIn, knowing what's out there. I'll send a ton of tips that I was fortunate to have through that consulting session to share. But if you've got questions, just let me know. Don't look at my LinkedIn right now. I think it's the model of what it should be. It is a work in progress.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
I get
next week.
Renee, I think did you want to jump in with a tip there?
Just real quickly, I think that so many jobs come from referrals, and that's definitely my experience in my business. I would say 98% of my clients, my nonprofit clients, come from a referral. I know Emilie's referred clients to me. And Emilie, I looked back because I was thinking about how do we connect and how do we meet? And I found an email between you and I had sent it to you March 18th, 2016. We had met previously. I'm not sure who connected us originally, but we reconnected at OLP's, Our Lady of Peace, an event.
With Lauren, yeah.
And what I did right away was the next day, I emailed Emilie, told her what a treat it was to reconnect, and immediately engaged her in conversation. I actually asked her what she thought of the event because the event host was my client at the time. And it began a conversation that has lasted for many, many years between the two of us, and really evolved from that to us both talking about being female entrepreneurs, running our own companies, supporting each other in that way. So it's just a little tip about those immediate follow-ups make a really big difference. I did hire my executive assistant off of LinkedIn. I do get a lot of random messages and emails, and I'm trying to find hers. I'll find it and figure out what was so compelling about what she said to me that I was intrigued to hire her. And Charles, I'll send you a link. I have a couple blogs I've written about networking for the Huffington Post that you can spread around.
I will definitely do that. I'll send a follow-up to everybody who's registered. And if you don't get that follow-up, you can always email me at charlesb@sandiego.edu. So let's continue with another question that someone had submitted. I think Andrea submitted this. What should you do when the positions you were hoping to get hired for, or the position you were hoping to get hired for, is no longer available due to hiring freeze? So Rebekah, perhaps you might have some input on that.
Well, I'll start with that because that's actually all too real for us. We were hoping to hire a career advisor earlier this spring and actually had to ask him to wait indefinitely for a start date. And in the meantime, it's been about, for me on the employer side, just staying engaged. We also know we ran the risk, right, of, in a sense, maybe losing this candidate. But what I would say is to stay engaged as often as you can, kind of to Brian's point about sending something that you can follow up with an article and sharing a link to a webinar maybe that you've seen, trying to stay engaged in some kind of practical way at the same time that you really do start to pivot to some other opportunities that might be out there. We do need to say this on this call. There are opportunities out there. They're just not necessarily going to be maybe in the places that you were hoping for 3 months. And we can speak more to that later as well.
Yeah. Brian, you had an anecdote about that when you were on call earlier.
I'm sure I do, but I can't remember what it was, but I'll tell something different.
Okay.
My first fundraising job many, many years ago was with the Baltimore Symphony. And in that position, I went in and I took an administrative assistant job and went to the Baltimore Symphony because I wanted to get a job in audience development, which was a position they had at the time. I was with the organization for about 3 months. We furloughed everybody and they did away with the audience development position. So this end goal that I had in mind wasn't where I was going to end up. I think if the job that you want is put off or it's not available, keep that connection, keep that going, but take another job with the organization. Take another job that has any type of thing that you can use as a transferable skill set, but stay in touch with the people from the organization that you look where you want to work, and just continue to let them know, hey, because of circumstances, that job's on hold. I had to do this, but I'm still interested in that. So when the time comes, I want to be there. And again, we'll keep coming back to this. I'll certainly keep hitting it over the head. Truly build relationships and be able to follow through with the people that you want. If you see an organization, you know there's a place you want to work. It takes effort and you have to put that effort in to be able to keep that relationship alive. But be open to things that aren't going to look like it's the path that you thought. Much of my life has been spent implementing my plan B. And plan A, for whatever reason it is, just isn't available. And at a certain point, I've just been able to figure out that's okay. because life very rarely sort of maps out the way that we want it. So COVID-19 or whatever else it's going to be, hard times are going to happen again. Build the relationships that you can lean on, build them now, and understand that everything you're doing now is going to have ramifications years from now. So Renee and Emilie connected, 4 years ago from something. You're planting seeds with everything that you do. And the more seeds that you can plant, the better off you're going to be in the future. So just be open to things consistently that may not be exactly what you think. I mean, you want to be able to stay focused with your eye on what your prize is. And let me also just take 1 second to step back about LinkedIn and some of the other things for any of the folks. I'm not sure exactly which specific schools folks are in that are on this call, but I think a lot of people that graduate from USD will end up going into sort of mission-driven organizations. So you can call it nonprofit, you can call it whatever. I would prefer to call it a mission-driven organization. For me, if you're applying for a position on my team at San Diego Humane Society, I'm going to go look at your LinkedIn profile. It's going to happen. And when I look at that, in an ideal world, what's going to help you stand out as a candidate is if you have some connections with animal welfare organizations, with other things that will show me that this job you're applying to is more than just a job. And to Renee's point as well, she hired someone because of the communication they wrote her on LinkedIn. If you're not taking the time to write really extraordinary cover letters and really looking at the outreach that you're putting in, if you look and you say, they probably get that from 300 people, change what you're writing, make yourself stand out. There has to be a reason. It has to be appropriate. Emilie talked about that. There has to be a reason. You've got to explain the why, what you're looking to do. And there are plenty of people, particularly in this USD network, that will be there to help you. They want to help you. Help them make those connections. Don't make it harder. You can make it a little bit easier. So hopefully that all came together in some way.
Yeah, I think what I drew out of that was show your passion, which is always great to have. I don't want to pick on Maya. We did just hire Maya I guess we officially hired you a couple of months ago, but her passion in her interview just came through. It just makes it easier when you have 10 good candidates. If one person just bubbles to the top, it just is that much easier because their passion shows through. So, Renee, I was going to ask you along those lines about mission-driven organizations or nonprofits. We've talked about, in the call that you weren't on, we talked a little bit about hiring. I didn't mean to point that out. I just meant, we talked about hiring might be frozen, but what can you do in the interim? That doesn't mean the work of the nonprofit or the mission-driven organization doesn't need to go on.
Right, absolutely. As you know, so many nonprofits have had to lay off staff for now, which means hiring might be a little tough. One of the things I was thinking about, either just to be able to give back and get out there, is to volunteer, obviously, for a nonprofit. Right now, nonprofits are really shifting from the in-person. That tends to be how fundraising works. And I'm curious, Brian, how much that shifted for you in your job, because so much is relational in what we do in our sector. But they're switching to online platforms, and they need help with that, and they need content. There's so many opportunities for you to volunteer and get out there. If there's a nonprofit or a cause that you're passionate about, it speaks to what Brian said. He's going to look in your LinkedIn, and during this time, okay, we see you maybe weren't employed, or you weren't employed in your mission, where you wanted to be in your mission-driven organization, but you were volunteering in where your passion lies, and that's going to make a big difference afterwards in doing that. And also, if you're a great volunteer, at a certain point, nonprofits are going to have to start rehiring, right? Because I'm sure if they've eliminated some of their staff, the staff that's left is now doing, instead of 5 jobs, probably 10 jobs. And that's not going to be sustainable. And if they have a great volunteer that's been showing up consistently and really helping, gives you a foot in the door, and you certainly are connected within that organization, which is going to give you a leg up in the interview process and a resume. I know we all look at LinkedIn when we're hiring. And if I see I have enough connections with that person, I mean, yes, there's formal references. I'm not even sure if folks still do that, because the informal reference, LinkedIn's allowed us to do that, to, you know, call someone that you haven't listed on your reference, because of course they're all going to say great things about you. That's what I do on my reference list. However, I'm going to look and see, oh, they know Emilie. Gosh, it looks like they both maybe volunteered at the same place, or there's some connection there. I'll reach out to Emilie and say, hey, you know, I talked to so-and-so. I'm really interested in hiring them. Do you know them? And Emilie may respond, yeah, they'd be a great hire. What a good match. Or, you know, I didn't have the best experience, but I have a colleague who's also worked with them. Why don't you talk to them first?
Great. Rebekah, you had a...
Can I just jump in for a second on that?
Sorry.
On sort of two things. My first job at the Baltimore Symphony, I got because I was a volunteer there. I knew I wanted to work there. I started volunteering there. They had 150 applications for the position that I initially obtained. So the volunteer part is huge. And this is, you know, if you can fine tune where you want to work, you can really set about achieving those goals. The other part is understanding how small this world and this community is. You know, this is just something that, this is much more about just, I'm just going to put it out there. Again, everything that you do, all of the people you interact with, because what Renee was talking about there, people are going to do informal reference checks. And I think for people that are newer in the job search process, that's probably not a concept that you perhaps fully grasp, is that folks are going to talk to people that are not on that formal list. Because if you can't put 3 references together, they're going to say positive things for you. That's a whole different story. But when you have people doing those informal checks, what you want those people to be able to do, this comes back to just being authentic and really adding value as a person, as an employee to what you're doing, and do not burn bridges, because they will have a very funny way to come back and haunt you. If we had more time in this call, I would share a number of stories on this. But we don't, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I think we could all share stories. That could be a whole nother Zoom call. I have my job today in part because of a bridge I really wanted to burn, but I didn't burn. The guy I thought wasn't as good a person as I thought he was actually became a very good reference for me to get this job. So don't burn bridges is a great example. Rebekah, I called on you, and then I'm going to go to Emilie.
Okay, well, and that was really why I mentioned, you know, Tina and Alex, who are on this call right now, because their networking with me, you know, back in the day now has them in a field that they really, really are truly passionate about, which you mentioned earlier. I just also want to add the word purpose too, because as we're talking about networking with purpose and even volunteering with purpose, getting really strategic about what it is, just to Brian's point, what it is that you really do want to pursue. And you have the time right now in this crazy season to actually sit and think and reflect and have people talk with you, have people advise you, do your own, I don't know, mind mapping, journaling, whatever it is that you can do to explore what it is that is going to be purposeful for you. Because you also don't want to just volunteer anywhere. I mean, to Brian's point, if you want to work in society, there are certain opportunities he's going to be looking for. So I just put up on the chat too, Startup San Diego is looking for volunteers. I'm a fan of that organization. So if somebody is thinking about even going into the field that I'm in, I'm going to say, look at Startup San Diego and volunteer there. Look at TEDx San Diego, which of course is going to have to figure out how to do TEDx differently, right, this summer. But again, get into a network of people that are like-minded, because then that purposeful sort of volunteering is also going to be to your advantage.
That's great. And as a reminder, we will do a follow-up, and I'll make sure to send those links that are being included in the chat to everybody. So Emilie, do you want to add to that, or shall I ask you a different?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is you've heard the phrase relationships through a lot of these different things. So no matter how good your profile is, your resume, anything like that, it really is, especially in San Diego, if you're planning to stay here, it is the way, or a really strong way, to get a job. Because all the examples you've just heard, oh my gosh, you're looking for this? I get asked a lot from some of my partner organizations, I'm looking for a person who has this skill set or this bio. Do you know anyone? And I can easily put through a couple of names, but I think the other thing you have to think about, and back to the example of doing some of these mock interviews, I chatted with a young woman who's a senior the other day at a different campus, and she was fantastic on the phone. I got her resume and I was shocked that something could be not so good, politely, I guess. And we had a long conversation at the end, and everybody gives different feedback on resumes. Feel free to ask, your peers and colleagues about that as well. We all give different feedback. And for her class, where she was having to do the resume, her instructor had given her a really strong grade on this because that's what they asked her to do. So we talked about the difference between a resume for class and a resume for the real world. And I told her at the end, I said, look, if I had met you at an event, we would definitely continue the conversation. We would grab coffee. I would want to know where you want to go, even if you weren't looking, because I so thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Her resume in no way portrayed anything about how great she was. So I think it's good to have people who maybe slightly or don't know that well, just that could be part of that 15-minute intro call. Would you mind if I sent you my resume and we could talk about some of these, and please give me feedback on if they align with who you are as well. It's a static piece of paper, it's a static frame on LinkedIn, but I think there are things that you can do to really make it shine. This young woman was actually looking for a career in marketing and branding, and there are things that you can do to make it look like a really well laid out marketing resume that catches the eye, because that's certainly an aspect of the role. But the relationship thing, especially in this county, solves a lot of opportunities leaving.
Indeed.
So can I build on that for a second? I think
Please.
One of the points you made there is a really, really great point, and just would hate to see it kind of get overlooked. And sort of on two folds. Number one, I would speculate that everybody on this call, if I asked you, how much do you love role playing? That most folks would not go, gee, that's the thing I like to do on Friday nights is role play. But it's probably one of the most critical things that you could do to build your interview skills and make sure that you have someone that's doing that role play with you, that it sounds like, Emilie, you did that on this resume, will actually provide critical feedback. It's not just going to pat you on the back and say, that was a fantastic answer, that was wonderful, but getting folks to do that, and in the opportunities that you have to reach out to people, understanding that many of you are younger in your career. You're not supposed to have all the answers. No one is. And to be able to take a resume to somebody and say, if I were applying for a job at your organization, could you tell me, would this resume get your attention? And if not, what would you like to see on that? How would you like to see that information reflected? Because you know what? At some point you may be applying, and that's what your end goal is. And they have just told you exactly what they're going to look for on a resume. And be willing to take that advice, be open to that. But I think you can use this time right now to get some exceptional feedback from folks. And I couldn't push role playing enough, because there's a flip side of this as well. A lot of people's resumes look really good, and then they come in an interview and they fall apart because they can't string sentences together. They don't have the soft skills that are going to get them hired. So practice that.
Yeah, I would recommend too, attention to detail. It's a stressful time. You're applying for these jobs. A lot of times you have to do everything online, and you don't even have human interaction until later in the process. But I can't tell you how many times we get applications for jobs in our office applying that mention the Aztecs or that mention UC San Diego. It's like, that is I hate to be, that is an in the trash. That saves me time. So the more of those I get, the easier it is, because I just move those out of the way. So just pay attention to those, to details, and say Dear Charles or Dear Mr. Bass, but don't say Dear Charles Bass, because that drives me crazy too. But I don't throw those away. It just drives me crazy. Rebekah, you've been in this business for a while. So talk about kind of taking the long view on the career search and how you deal with that while how you stay focused and disciplined in the midst of all this chaos.
Right. Well, and Brian's already alluded to this, right? That in a sense, you're going to take something for now if you are a 2020 graduate coming out of University of San Diego, and realize that there are some things that you want to have in that job, whatever that is. And I will say again, yes, there are opportunities out there. You want to make sure, obviously, that this is something that you are passionate about, enough to be able to say, I can do this for a while, realizing, again, it might not be the dream job or the job that you went to graduate school for. You want to make sure that there are people around you that are going to help you continue to learn and help you continue to grow. And you might have to realize it might not be necessarily your manager, but maybe some coworkers there. At the end of the day, you also want to say, you know, again, I believe in this enough that I'm going to say I can do this for a while, that there's going to be some learning that comes out of it. Because again, what we're not saying is, well, just take something and it's just going to be absolutely awful. No, what we're saying is it just might not be ideal. But I do want to pick up on something that Brian said in terms of this long game is it may also put you in the direction of something that you never, ever thought of before. So one of the things that I also like to pay attention to is when we think about the last economic downturn, 2008, 2009, some companies that you now know as are companies that came out of that downturn, companies like Uber, Airbnb, Pinterest. So I say to students all the time, you can expect to be in a job that does not yet exist in a company that has yet to be started. We are on a Zoom call. Zoom started in 2011. Bring up those examples because again, we just don't know what's out there. And so I would just encourage you get out, get into something, make sure it's got great people. And I'm one of those optimists that believes great people are everywhere, and make sure that it is a place where you could at least say, I can do this for now, and then see what the world opens up for you. If you check any of our LinkedIn profiles, Emilie's, Brian's, Renee's, mine, you'll probably see on there at least 2, if not 3 opportunities that we would have said we never would have thought we could do that. Long game.
Yeah, long game. That's really good advice. So kind of along those lines, Renee and Emilie, we've all been forced into this world of Zoom meetings. By the way, the past president of Zoom is a USD grad, Dave Berman. It's that Torero network, man. Just keep on networking. In a world, we're all in this new world with the Brady Bunch all the time and all these virtual get-togethers. What can our graduates do to make the most of this and be prepared for what's next? Renee or Emilie?
Either way. So I think Zoom is an interesting one. There are some Zoom tips and tricks. We've all, seen some of the memes and some others. I will say I was standing socially distanced from my neighbor last night, who did share a bit of a video from a conference call he was on yesterday with a new, very senior exec, head of IT in their company, who took the call from the shower. Like, I couldn't even, it happens, I guess. And you could just see him doing his hair and all this stuff. Like, number one, who takes a phone in the shower? There's something wrong with that. But there's multitasking, but that's not, like, it still happens. And we've been living on Zoom for 8 weeks now. I've lived on it for years. So I think some basic etiquette things still hold, right? New world, there's still nothing like a handwritten thank you note, a follow-up email. Brian, you mentioned sending an article, different things, maybe even things that you've written or contributed. That doesn't go away. That old school Emilie post will always be in vogue. So definitely follow up on that. I think we've talked about networking. We've talked about being intentional. My only other suggestion right now is read, right? Read an article, read the San Diego Business Journal, read a book about business, read something that you love, nonfiction, fiction, what have you, because it re-energizes your spirit too. And I think that's a piece that you have to really take care of. And Mariana, I know you mentioned some wellness and some mental health things at the beginning. Take advantage of those opportunities. It's very easy to not have a great day and you're not able to go out and meet with a friend for coffee or grab a drink, all those normal things that you would do if you didn't have a great day. So make sure you're feeding yourself as well. Good stories, good news stories, drop a fun note to a friend, whatever it is, but make sure you take care of yourself because you're going to come across much better, much more positive if you're in the right mind frame to do these interviews and you don't show up thinking, oh, it's just another interview, it's not going to work out. That comes across more than you realize.
That's a good tip. Renee.
Well, one of the recommendations which Maya is doing is the interesting background. I think that is something that helps you stand out, and especially if you can say something about your personality. What you see behind me is my kitchen and my wine fridge because I'm sitting on the floor, which is not ideal. I'm the don't. Oh, Brian's got a cool, look at what Brian's got going. See, exactly. My husband lives on Zoom calls, and so he's come up with some unique backgrounds that really reflect his personality. Now, obviously, he's employed and not looking for a job, but I think that does say something about your personality, being, just because you only get us from, chest up to do. So find ways to be creative around that, to really be able to reflect that back. And just a quick little side note, Rebekah, you and I met at a Women Give San Diego event in October of 2011.
Oh my goodness.
Thank goodness for email, because I can search it and figure out when
I
I've met.
love that. Right.
And
Now we need to reconnect.
I know.
We need to reconnect. We're going to do that after this call.
Well, it actually led to an opportunity, which you may or may not remember. You were at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, and yes, you were looking for a strategic plan or something along those lines, and you forwarded the RFP to me, which was wonderful. And while I didn't get the client, I still made a great connection that, you know, at a networking event that then invited me to potentially get a job. So that was huge. Now, Brian, on the other hand, I think we met when we were moving a mutual friend out of her house. Is that about right? 15 years ago? Yeah.
So
if I could just say something real quickly about Renee's idea. So I keep behind me, I wasn't in this space on our earlier call when we were preparing for this webinar, but the two paintings behind me are local artists. And I absolutely am obsessed with supporting our local arts and culture scene. I'm an art commissioner with the city. And so not everyone always picks up on it, but if you are trying to establish rapport with someone, just as you do when you come into an in-person meeting, it's an opportunity to talk about, to your point, Renee, that's important for me and just another angle of how we get to be seen. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I would just jump in. One of the things in these conversations that you're having, and you know, in an ideal world for me, the conversation is not just going to be about the business. You're going to learn things like, okay, Rebekah supports local artists, and hey, here's an artist that I saw. Coming back to being able to provide value and stay connected. For me, I'm a pretty open book. I like to ride bikes. I like animals. I love music. If you can connect with me on one of those three things, we also hire people that we like. There's just truth to that. We in the pre-call that we made on this, we also said in an ideal world for me, I hire people that I already know. I have to hire people occasionally that I don't, but I have a pretty strong track record of hiring people that I've worked with at prior organizations or have some other connection with. And being able to know the folks that you're doing, that's what's also going to get, if I know you and you apply for the job, I'm at least going to call HR. One of the other things is HR screens most of the resumes. So you need someone who's going to say, hey, Brian Daugherty, I think is going to be in this pool. Can you make sure that his resume actually comes to me? Because at the very least, I want to see that. I want that in the applicant pool to take a look at. There are sort of steps along the way that you're looking to make sure that you can cross that next hurdle in the job search process. And I'm going to go ahead and be willing to bet that if you had met with Rebekah, you picked up on that and said, that's some pretty interesting art you have behind you. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And you followed up with something a couple of weeks or even months later, Rebekah would remember that. And that would go a long way in any communications you're going to have with her moving forward.
that's great. And it doesn't even have to be tied to the position that you interviewed with her for. It's tied to that art that you know, is fascinating. And this is a story about local artists. So one piece of advice I have, and it doesn't apply to everybody, but I thought I was a really good multitasker, but it's easy to pull up your email when you're on Zoom. And people don't know you're looking at email because they see you looking towards the camera, but then you get distracted and somebody might not, might ask you a question you certainly weren't paying attention. So I would recommend not multitasking, particularly if you're doing an interview or something that's really important and you want people to come across. So we have about 10 minutes left, 15 minutes left. I'm gonna, if anyone has questions and they want to include that in the chat, please do so. Or if you want to pop up and raise your hand on the video, that's fine too. And I'm gonna, in about 10 minutes, we'll call on Andrea as well. So maybe a last round of questions from the group. It's you know, that we had earlier. It's easy for everyone to, you know, to go to Google and do some job searching here, especially in the time of COVID. What tips or advice would you all have that you may not find on Google? And I'll start with Emilie.
Yeah, I think we've actually covered a lot of it. There was a good point earlier. All of these jobs are out there. should you apply? People aren't necessarily taking things down. There's a strategic advantage to always collecting resumes for roles because you might find someone great who you hadn't thought about. I think the point about trying to reach out to HR or talent acquisition in that company, if you can, just to check in beyond the automated email that comes usually when you submit something. Read up on the company's websites. I know I'm doing a lot of research on some robotic process vendors and trying to determine who we want to partner with. And I can go in and look at what they've got open in different positions right now and get a better sense of, are they hiring for professional services engineers? When they say they don't do that, what's the story? So if you read through the different types of job postings and where they are, I think that gives you a sense of the company and where they are. But it is frustrating to not get an answer, right? We're an immediate feedback society. We text, we're on social media. You can like, you can dislike. That still doesn't happen right now in the world of job search. So again, I think it's 6 degrees of separation and seeing who you can connect with in real life on Zoom. However, to actually ask some questions and see where you are, and it's another chance to get yourself out there.
Very good, Rebekah.
I just want to say to the 2020 grads, especially, like, you have a unique opportunity. And this is going to be the year you're probably going to do something new and different and unexpected. Just to kind of keep that in mind, just to be open to that. Get support around you. I mean, get your friends around you that maybe are employed or doing something that they love. Really just come alongside you in this process. Because there are things out there. I will mention a very specific resource. The San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, EDC, actually is keeping a list. It's on their website of companies in San Diego that are hiring now. And I'm encouraging employers to post on that list. So again, there are things out there. Keep your people close to you and just stay really positive.
That's great. We'll add that list to our follow-up email as well.
Okay.
Hey.
So I think what I will share is it's okay to take a job that is not your dream job.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know. And I shared this with Charles. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're going to do this. So my first job was at, after school, was at a museum. And I got to work with major donors. It was great. For some silly reason, I decided to quit that job right after 9/11. So I can understand what it's like to be in the market for a job at like the worst time to be hired. And I needed a job. I needed to be able to pay the rent, actually to be able to get an apartment. So what I did, I took a job that wasn't my passion. And then I interviewed on my lunch breaks until I did, in fact, find my dream job and really what I wanted to do. And I'll share what the job is, because Charles told me if I gave him a list of 100 jobs, he would have chosen this, the 100th. So I was hired as a marketing assistant for a company that drug tested long haul truckers. Not even in my wheelhouse. And Brian, I see you smiling because Brian's been with me a long time. Like, it's the last job you'd expect me to do, but it paid money. It allowed me to get an apartment on my own. It allowed me to buy some furniture so I could stop sitting on the ground. I mean, I know these things sound really funny, and I didn't have to stay there all that long, to be honest. And when I gave my 2-week notice, the gentleman that hired me actually said, I almost didn't hire you because you were too smart for this position and I knew you weren't going to stay. And so I'm not saying play dumb. What I'm saying is it's okay to take that job that's not your dream job, that might even be a little odd. You may not even keep it on your resume or LinkedIn moving forward, but if it gets you moving and going in a couple steps down the road, there's something to be said, as we're talking about the mental, emotional health, is having a job, even if it's not the job, is still going to get you up every morning and going and doing that. And the other thing I would recommend is it's just do take breaks, do ask for help. I am the worst person at asking for help until I literally, like, my legs sawed off and I'm like limping along, and then I might mention that I need a little bit of help. And so I'm getting better about asking for help, especially because we have 2 working parents and a 4-year-old and no childcare. And a lot of you are probably in very similar positions. So today I asked my parents for help so that I didn't have a 4-year-old zooming in and out of the screen, although that's been pretty common to do. So I'll end with that.
All right. Well, thanks, Renee. And Brian.
I think I would build on that a little bit to say the asking for help part is also, if I could go back 25 years and do things again, which is sort of what everybody wants, right? The whole hindsight is 20/20 thing. I would unquestionably say the thing that I should have been doing my entire career that I was not was building my network and making it really, really strong and building relationships, because truly understanding, if you stay in San Diego, particularly, if you stay here for your career and you're 25 and you have 25, 35, 40 years that you're going to develop relationships, that is an exceptionally long time. You can know so many people in this town who are going to be useful for you. I think you just have to be active. One of the things that we touched on at the beginning of this call was also that mental health component. And I think it's important to be able to understand that when you don't get that dream job, or a job that you interviewed for that you really wanted and you didn't get it, it can feel soul crushing. It can feel really deflating. But every single piece of this sort of puzzle, and you as a person and you as a professional, all of it will come together a little bit later on. All of these are just truly learning experiences. So when you fall down or something doesn't go your way, and it's way easier said than done, I understand that. I don't want to be just issuing platitudes to you all. But when I was 25, I thought, oh my God, I didn't get this job. It's the end of the world. I'm not going to get this. I'm not going to do that. I can look back now and tell you I'm in an absolute spectacular place for me. Much of my life has been dedicated to saving animals and animal welfare. I feel incredibly fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't start doing volunteer work for animals all on my own accord, if I didn't become a fundraiser, if I didn't do all these things. So a lot of the things that are going to shape where you're going to be 5 and 10 years from now, you just need to be open to them. Don't shut them down, and never stop learning and building relationships with every step of the way.
Charles,
Very good advice.
can I
Yes.
respond to Tracy's question?
Sure.
So Tracy asked the group, she said, jumping off Renee's comments, how do you recommend addressing the assumption that you will quickly leave a position that you may be overqualified for? I mean, first is, you may not leave it that soon. I mean, depending on how the market goes. So I wouldn't fear that because you don't know how long you'll be there, and nor do they. And they don't know if they're going to have to lay off people either. So I wouldn't worry too much about that piece. What I would say, if you're getting the feedback of, hey, you're really overqualified for this job, why are you here? And you can address it head on. Gosh, in this economy, you're getting a deal with me. I'm coming with lots of experience. And what I want to do is take the position you are offering and be able to elevate it. There is a lot of skills that I can bring to it that you are going to benefit from. And I'm willing to take this on and build on it if there's an opportunity to do that.
That's great. I think Emilie also pointed out, be authentic. Authenticity comes through loud and clear. And so in whatever you're doing, it's really important. There was one other question I'll jump to real quickly, and then I'll get to Andrea. And the question was from someone from Mexico City saying, what advice would you have for international students who are graduating and wanting to work in San Diego? And I'll toss that to Rebekah real quickly, unless someone else has advice.
Rebekah, you're muted.
And wanting to look for opportunities here in San Diego. It's going to go back to everything we've already said. It's the networking. So are there some opportunities through the chamber, some opportunities through the EDC, checking out either some of the smaller EDCs and chambers as well. And it's really going to be back to that networking, everything that we've said.
And on Mexico City specifically, if you don't know Lynn Ihara Hoffman, you should. She's amazing. She went to USD undergrad and grad. She's got a cybersecurity degree there, and she's also incredibly well networked, bilingual, and has done work on both sides of the border. And she's always willing to talk to alums. So that's a number, Charles. I'm sure she wouldn't mind you saying that, or just put her LinkedIn profile in your follow-up. She is fantastic and is really good at connecting those dots and understanding the cross-border challenges sometimes.
And see, that's how it works. That specific name that he just puts out right now, like for someone not to follow up on that, that's the name, right? So absolutely, this is how it works. And there's a specific name, you go from there.
I'll buy our cocktails to cover all the emails that you guys are going to send her, so it's all good.
Yeah, one thing we talked about too is when you are meeting with somebody, ask them who else you should talk to. So if you do have a chance to meet with Emilie, she's going to say, you know, by the way, I heard you say Mexico City. You should talk to Renee Hoffman. She is amazing and has all these talents. So always, you know, people love to, that's my main job is to connect people. So if you ask me, I'm probably not going to be able to help you, but I know somebody that can help you. So, which hopefully.
Yeah. And just a quick note on the follow-up. When you see that email come through, reply all so that the person who connected you knows that you responded. And then you can say, I'm dropping, you know, if Charles connects Rebekah and I respond, Rebekah, great to meet you. Charles, thank you so much. Dropping Charles to BCC. So he doesn't have to be on all the threads, but please do reply all so that I don't have to go back, or Charles doesn't have to go back and say, hey, did you ever follow up on this? They don't have to be on every thread, but at least that initial one to acknowledge that you did see it, you did appreciate it, and you're taking it on your own.
And please, if somebody does make that introduction for you, especially to someone, well, regardless if they're higher up or not, please do follow up. I talked to a guy who recommended he connect with someone who happened to be the general manager of a Major League Baseball team. That's a pretty big connection. He never followed up.
I'll take that intro.
So yeah, really. I mean, he wouldn't hire me, so I tried to see if I could hire somebody else. But anyway, before we get too far gone, I want to introduce Andrea Garcia, who's the chair of the Graduate Student Council. I hope she's still on. There she is. And I think you're muted, but nope, you're not. So Andrea.
Thank you, Charles. I just really wanted to thank you all for your time, your insight, your experiences during maybe your own challenging times and how you've navigated the job search. And I'm really grateful for the partnership with Maya and Charles as they helped navigate. I myself will be graduating, looking for a job within higher education, but also open to new opportunities. And I've worked in a nonprofit before as well. So I think I have some of that experience that I could utilize as well. But I personally just want to thank you. I know that there are other graduate students here on this meeting that are really grateful as well, but I just want to say thanks again. And it's very insightful. I will also be sharing this recording with some of my own friends and colleagues. And so thanks, really so much gratitude for you all.
Yes, and I'll say the same. I asked you all to be here, and I so appreciate your friendship and your very professional manners in which you dealt with this crowd. And I don't know if anybody can stay on a little bit if others have questions, but if not, we're going to send you lots of information via email, and I encourage you to link in with all of us. And again, Brian, Emilie, Rebekah, and Renee, thank you so much. Thanks to Maya, Andrea, and Marianne as well, and to all our graduate students. Congratulations to the class of 2020. It's not what you were hoping for, I think, when you walked across that stage, but I invite you to come back October 16th through the 18th for Homecoming and Family Weekend, which is when we will celebrate the class of 2020.
Absolutely. I like it.
Good luck,
Thanks,
everyone.
Charles.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Maya.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.